Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Can I please request everyone to settle down as the program will be starting in about 2 to 3 minutes. If there are any ladies in the ladies' side, please can they come over here? Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We have the memorization of Holy Quran workshop today. And we have speakers, Sister Maliha Abdullah and Brother Mason Mayor Ali. I'll do a quick introduction of them and then hand it over to them. First, I'll start with Sister Maliha Abdullah. We are very happy to have her. She is from the UK, and she is specialized in philosophy from the Hausa Ilmiya in Qom. She began her Hausa studies at the Hausa of England in 2015, as well as completing an MA in character education from the University of Birmingham. She has been teaching and running courses for sisters, including as instructor for Mizan Institute on a variety of topics, and she's a Hafsa of the Holy Quran, completing her journey in the span of 8 years. We also have with his brother Mason Mayor Ali, who has memorized approximately half of the Quran between the ages of about 11 to 17 years. Having studied Tajweed under a number of different teachers, he began teaching Quran recitation and Tajweed around the age of 15, and he has been teaching children and adults in the community through Darul Quran, as well as university contacts for almost 10 years. He graduated in 2020 with a BA plus MSc in Natural Sciences from the University of Cambridge, and he's now working in Johnson Matthey as a product manager after a 2-year graduate program. Please, can we start with a loud Salawat recitation, please?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم نزل عليك الكتاب بالحق مصدقا لما بين يديه وأنزل التوراة والإنجيل من قبل هدى للناس وأنزل الفرقان إن الذين كفروا لهم عذاب شديد والله عزيز ذو انتقام إن الله لا يخفى عليه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء هو الذي يصوركم في الأرحام كيف يشاء لا إله إلا هو العزيز الحكيم هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات محكمات هن أم الكتاب وأخر متشابهات فأما الذين في قلوبهم زيغ فيتبعون ما تشابه منه ابتغاء الفتنة وابتغاء تأويله وما يعلم تأويله إلا الله والراسخون في العلم يقولون آمنا به كل من عند ربنا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا إنك جامع الناس ليوم لا ريب فيه إن الله لا يخلف الميعاد صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Please recite the salawat. So first things first, on behalf of both of us, we wanted to say Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And we wanted to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. First of all, thank you to the Jamaat of Leicester for having us. It's really an honor. You guys have a really beautiful center. I was just telling my brother on the way in, it's a really beautiful center. May God give you more barakah, inshallah. So my name is Sister Maliha. This is Brother Mason. He is actually my brother and not just Brother Mason. Just before we start, our names are up there and also our email addresses are on there. Now, I forgot to ask my brother exactly how to word this, but if you would like to ask any questions to either of us, I think Mason, if I know him well, he would say in the field of Hifdh or maybe Tajweed. Those would be two areas that he would be really, really happy to answer questions with. And for me, if there are anything to do with Hifdh or any kind of other inquiries or anything, any questions that you have, particularly for sisters but not restricted to, my email address is there as well and my brother's email address is there. So please feel free if you have anything after the program or anything such like. So today, we're hoping to talk through a little bit about memorizing the Holy Quran, which may be a familiar concept to some of us, may be a little bit more alien to some of us. And, you know, we're going to hopefully talk you guys through it in a few different stages. And we'll switch between myself and my brother speaking. So before we start, you know, even thinking about how to do it, how long it takes, how long it doesn't take, and we're going to talk about how it worked for us as well. It's always great to start with, okay, well, why? The first question that always comes to mind for many of us is, well, why? Why are we memorizing the Holy Quran? And the Holy Quran gives us an answer, almost. You know, the beauty of the Holy Quran is that we can go there with questions and often come out with answers. So the question is, okay, why memorize the Holy Quran? So there's a beautiful verse in Surah Qamar that's repeated 6 or 7 times, and it says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. And I didn't put the translation up, but it means we have made the Quran easy, yassarna. We have made the Quran easy to remember, لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Is there anyone who is going to memorize the Quran for us? And Shaheed Mutahari, who's a really, really eminent scholar, he says something. He says, this verse is really interesting because usually in the Arabic culture, when you memorize something, it's usually poetry, right? Because it has a rhythm, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's really easy to memorize because sometimes it rhymes, you know, it's poetry. But the Quran is one of the first, or it is the first book of prose in Arabic that is actually easy to memorize. So the Quran is giving us answers to start with. But if we look at some other reasons why the Quran is such a beautiful book to memorize, we can look towards the life of the Prophet and his community. It's really interesting because at the time of the Prophet, memorization was a really big thing, right? You didn't have a lot of writing down of the Quran. That's how the Quran was transmitted from generation to generation. In the early days, it was memorized and then passed on and then passed on. And before it was written down. It was obviously standardized at one point. But at the time of the Prophet, memorizing the Quran was a big deal. And it was such a big deal to the Holy Prophet himself that he would actually give those people who had memorized portions of the Holy Quran or the whole of the Quran specific positions in society. So they were prioritized when it came to being the Imam of Jama'ah or the commander of groups, when they sent out groups to do tabligh or to, fetch something from a different, they would make the memorizers of the Quran the heads of those groups, even if they were young individuals or young children or teenagers. And so it wasn't a age-based hierarchy at the time of the Prophet. It was a taqwa-based hierarchy, and it was a connection to the Quran-based hierarchy. It was even the case that they were given precedence. So the memorizers of the Holy Quran were given precedence. They were buried first if they were martyred in the Battle of Uhud. Now, this isn't to say that we are trying to emphasize that the Holy Quran, memorizing it, is going to give you a specific societal status. That's not the case here. What we're trying to say is that the Holy Prophet saw something really, really special about memorizing the Holy Quran. And it wasn't just the Holy Prophet. It wasn't just in the Quran. We see that even in the words of our really, really great scholars, there are some really heavy words there. If God gave me another life, I would give priority of my time to memorizing the Holy Quran. This is not a small statement. Someone like Ayatollah Ja'far Subhani, who spent 40, 50, 60 years learning about Islam, learning about the intricacies of their religion, for them to say, if I had another life, I'd probably spend it differently, that's a really weighty statement. We have another statement from Ayatollah Khamenei who says something like, I feel envious to those who have memorized the Holy Quran. Now, Ayatollah Khamenei, at the same level, 40, 50, 60 years of studying the religion of Islam. And he's saying, I actually feel envious. I wish that I had spent my time memorizing the Holy Quran. So it really must have some specific advantages that not memorizing the Holy Quran doesn't have. And I'm going to pass it on to Maysam now, because having gone through this journey, both of us, we can actually think of some personal benefits that memorizing the Holy Quran might have had. So I'm going to pass that on to you now.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So, as my sister said, these are benefits that we have taken from our own personal experiences. You can go through all of the books and you can see that there are many places where it said, the reward of a person who memorizes the Quran, the reward of a person who recites the Quran on a regular basis. These are all written, but these are what we have seen in our own lives, the benefits. And the first thing, and probably the most important thing, is that you have a really good bird's eye view of what actually the Quran contains. It's an amazing book. But when you only pick it up every once in a while, when you only touch it in Ramadan, when you only read it when you need to, you don't realize that there's stuff throughout the book that is connected, interlinked. You'll see a verse here, you'll realize, oh, actually a few pages back it's a similar verse, but it's also mentioned, the same story is mentioned here, and you'll start making these connections in your mind, and you'll have a much better understanding of what the Quran contains. Memorization also gives you a concrete reason to pick the Quran up every day. And I think it was my sister who said this. It was she said, okay, but people will argue, oh, we should pick up the Quran anyway, but do we pick up the Quran every single day? This gives you a reason to do it, and that maybe that's not the right way to think about it, but if it gives you a reason to pick it up, it's important. It allows you to bring it into everyday conversations. You have connections in your mind that you can bring in. Someone will be talking about a topic, and it might not just be in conversation, it might even be during a class, during a lecture, while you're reading something. You might pick up on a topic and you actually recognize where that's mentioned in the Quran, what else is mentioned about it, what the actual, the rule is in the Quran, the actual wording. You'll start to notice some grammar, things about the Arabic language as well, which you might not be familiar with previously. And fundamentally, it gives you a very deep, close connection, a close relationship with the Quran and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then a final personal improvement that we saw is we both saw an improvement in our memory capacity overall. We kind of started this when we were students, and as students you have exams all the time, so actually it helps you with your revision because your ability to retain stuff on a short term and on a medium term actually improves significantly. So these are just some of the benefits that we've seen. Next, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about our own sort of personal journey to give you a flavor of what it looked like for us. Because everybody has their own journey, everybody does this in different ways, and everyone has also different starting and ending points. So for me, the dates, I had to put it on a timeline. So the dates might not be exactly correct to the year, but roughly they're correct. I remember I started memorizing when I started memorizing the 30th juz. It was kind of a madrasa initiative. They brought in a teacher. We had a class of maybe like 10 or 15 of us, and they encouraged us to memorize one surah each week. So the first week of Surah Naba, then Surah Nazi'at, then Surah Abasa, and then so on and so forth. And it was with a teacher, but it was quite a big group of us, and not everyone was that committed. So, or not everyone found it that easy either. But I would come back each week and I would say, oh, okay, it took a bit of time because it's a page and a half to memorize a week. You've never really done it before, but if you listen to it enough and if you keep repeating it, it's kind of, it's kind of okay. And it was kind of fun as well to come back and to recite it back to your teacher and to kind of compete with your classmates. But then there was no follow-up to that because it was just kind of a one-off initiative almost. But alhamdulillah, we were really fortunate to be able to do it. I think the aim was to participate in a competition where we'd memorize the 30th juz. Fast forward maybe like 1 or 2 years, then we said, okay, let's actually start memorizing. And there was a group of, now we whittled ourselves down to maybe like 9 or 10 of us. And around about the age of maybe 12 or 13, we actually started doing this in a more systematic way. We did it from the front of the Quran. So we did the first juz. And the objective was, from that previous competition to the following year, to go from having done 1 juz to having done 2 juz at the competition. That was the overall objective. And again, this was with a teacher, fantastic teacher. I'll talk about him later as well. And then slowly, we were doing it at a very slow pace. And I was like, I feel like I can do more. I feel like I can do this faster. And I feel like I can get more out of it. So I started doing more. I started upping it from 1 page a week to 2 pages a week. And this was alongside doing my GCSEs and my A-levels later on. And alhamdulillah, I was able to reach the point where I'd got through, so including the 30th juz and the portion that I'd memorized from the beginning of the Quran, I managed to memorize just about half of the Quran. And throughout the way, I started teaching as well, and this had having memorized parts of the Quran had really good benefits, because then you can, when you're teaching kids, sometimes they don't really pay attention to what you're doing if you're not looking at them. So having the knowledge of what they're reciting, but being able to watch them at the same time, it gives an added dimension. It was actually really, really beneficial. And then similarly, like I said, with my exams, I saw benefits because I was able to retain information very easily. And I didn't struggle revising for my GCSEs and for my A-levels, alhamdulillah. It was really, really beneficial that way. Then came along university and a very intense change of routine and change of life. And then came along COVID, and then came along work as well. So since then, I haven't been able to maintain the same pace. I've been able to retain a lot of what I've memorized, but I find it very difficult to dive back into it, because when you're building up from kind of zero to kind of slowly accelerating, it's quite easy. But then to kind of dip back into the high pace of things is quite hard. So the lesson to learn is, if you're along the journey, don't give up and don't stop, because it's difficult to get back into it. But when you've got that momentum, it's really not easy, but you've got the strength, you've got the willpower, you'll be able to continue and inshallah reach the end. So that's my journey. I'm going to pass back over to my sister to speak about her journey as well, because it's slightly different in the way she did it.
Okay, so just like Mason said, mine looked a little bit different. We actually started at the same time in terms of from the front of the Quran. There was no sibling rivalry there, by the way. Actually, there was a little bit, but it was a healthy kind of relationship where, you know, he encouraged me and I encouraged him. So mine looked a little bit different. It was a little bit more of a, I would say single path, or I would say, you know, with fewer pauses. I started in 2012. I was about 15 years old, and it was just something that the more I did, the more I enjoyed, and the more I enjoyed, the more I did. And so this is something we'll talk about later on, is that I did this without a teacher. So I memorized 23 of the 30 ajza that I did without a teacher. It was just something that I was doing by myself. I had a little bit of support from family. Actually, I had a lot of support from family, but I didn't have companions and teachers on the way. And we're going to talk about the impact of that on a person's life. Because if I could go back and do it differently, I would say I would have loved to have mubahitha partners. We're going to talk about who those are, and we're going to talk about the importance of teachers. And so I did it by myself, and you know, A levels, university, alhamdulillah, I got married, all of these things that with life, and that's one of the messages that we're hoping to show you guys today, is that this became a part of our life in the sense that our life still carried on. There are different models of memorizing the Quran where sometimes you put your life on hold, memorize the Quran, and then restart your life. But this was a model in which we still had our lives, we still had our degree and our studies and everything that went alongside that. And it fit more in with someone who lives in the UK, because all of us have those things that we have alongside. We have kids, we have maybe grandkids, we have responsibilities. So that's something, inshallah, we're going to talk about. 2018, and alhamdulillah, my husband and I had the opportunity to move to Qom. And when I moved to Qom and I completed my last 7 ajza, that's when I felt the beauty of having a teacher and the beauty of having mubahitha or companions on my journey. And we're going to talk about those things, inshallah, later on. And so that experience completely shifted. And you know, in 2020, that journey completed. And a lot of people ask, well, okay, what does it look like? Now that you're done, what does it look like? Is it done? Are you done? You've memorized it and it's in your brain and you're finished. But no, it became a part of my everyday life, in the sense that it's something that I continue to do every day. And we're going to talk about why that's important. My daughter agrees. Please recite salawat. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. And so a lot of people ask, okay, what does that look like? And what that looks like is we still have to retain the memorization that we've done. And that's one of the biggest things we're going to talk about today, is how do I, because it's very rewarding to memorize something, and we will feel very accomplished when we memorize a portion of the Quran. But the thing that many of us fall down on, and this is a collective struggle that a lot of us have, is how to then maintain that, retain that, not forget it. And that's the fear that we have, well, what if we forget? And so we're going to talk about what it looks like to consolidate, review, go on. And that's why I kind of wanted to put that in my little journey. And so that comprises a little bit about why we memorize. And that comprises kind of the first portion of this workshop. And what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about some of the principles behind actually memorizing. The things that, and these are from our own personal journey, it's not just from our own approaches to doing it. There are books that we've referred to, there are techniques that have been, researched. And so these are things that we want to bring to you guys. These are like I would say the golden nuggets of the last 10 years, the things that we wish we'd known at the beginning. And so these are the things we want to share with you. And it's going to be very principle based. It's not going to be like, okay, on day 1 you do this, on day 2 you do this. That's not the approach that we're going to show you guys today. We're going to show you that if you have these principles of, for example, memorizing, retaining, for example, habit stacking, these are all principles that we're going to talk about. And these will be principles that guide your journey, inshallah, in a way that you can then adjust your routine to fit these principles, but also be unique to your own circumstances. Because all of us, I'm looking at the different ages and stages in the audience, and we're all going to have different commitments that mean that we do these things in slightly different ways. But the important thing is that we're going to stick to these principles. So I'm going to hand back over.
So when, before going into the details, I think one really important thing to understand is what is memorization actually? What are the elements of memorization? And this is not a dictionary definition, but from what we understand, memorization is all about transferring things from your short-term memory over to your medium-term memory, over to your long-term memory. So you might read something today, but you might forget it by the end of the day. You might have something happen this week, but in a couple of weeks' time, you might not remember it. So it's about transferring things from one to the other. And therefore, all of your actions and all of the principles that you use to set up your routine and your way of doing things need to aid these processes and the transfers. So we'll talk about that in the section on routine a bit later. So we're going to talk about memorization and retention throughout the presentation. That's okay. Before diving into actual memorization, though, there are a few things that we need to almost have an awareness of or be ready for, and consider these things before we embark on this journey, because it is a journey, and we need to prepare ourselves. So the first thing is our intention and our motivation. Our intention is our facilitator for starting and continuing this journey. It will provide us with some strength, as long as as with any action, as long as our intention always remains pure and sincere, inshallah, we will be successful. So it's important to remain humble and remember that your intention is that you are doing this for the pleasure and for the service of Allah. You're not doing, like, okay, you might have added bits of motivation, your sibling might be doing it, and it might give you a bit of competition, but your true intention in your mind and in your heart needs to be that you're doing it for Allah. You also need to have the desire and strong willpower to do it, because there will come times where life is going to test you, it's going to get difficult, you're going to get busy, you're going to feel tired, you're not going to feel like wanting to do it. You've got to be ready to continue. And hard work will always beat talent in this area. You might be really, really good at this, you might not be very good at it, but over time you'll improve. But if you don't have the work ethic, you won't be able to get there. But if you've got the work ethic, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide the talent for you. And everybody has the potential and the capacity to be able to do this. Your environment is really, really crucial. One thing that I didn't mention during my journey, and in fact this is the first thing that I should have mentioned, is that it all starts at home. And it's all about the family environment that you have, what you surround yourself with, what the culture is like with the people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis. How fundamental are these principles to the people that you are spending your time with? Because that will influence you, that will influence the way that you spend your time and the actions that you take. Number 4, it's a really big commitment. Not just in terms of the time, I'll come back to time in a moment, but in terms of the mental commitment, the capacity that you have mentally to spend on this. You might say, okay, I've got 24 hours in a day, so subtract 8 because I'm sleeping, subtract 8 because I'm working, so I've got another 8 hours, and I can squeeze this in here. It doesn't quite work like that. It's not like you're just kind of tacking this on to the end of your day or tacking this in somewhere. You need to find an actual place in your time for it, because this is a really big time commitment, and you need to find place in your mind for it as well. I find it quite difficult to do it alongside a full-time job, because of the mental capacity that I don't have the mental capacity to be able to do an 8-hour work day, and also on top of this spend a good few hours on this memorization. So in order for me to be able to continue my journey, I need to let something give way. I need to reduce some of my capacity so I can reallocate it here. And that's what you'll need to be aware of as well. It's a really, really big commitment. And then the next things that I'll talk about is going to be more on the actual practical preparation side of things. So we'll talk about routine in a moment, and then your teachers and everything. But if we just go back one slide very briefly, the point 5a is on recitation. One thing that we made sure of is the students that we suggest should embark on this memorization journey, they should already have a strong foundation in Quran recitation. Their level of fluency, their level of application of the rules of tajweed should already be very strong. Because when you memorize, you need to make sure you're memorizing something correctly. You don't want to be memorizing with mistakes, because they're very difficult to correct those later. So a lot of us growing up in the Khoja community, we have a tendency to recite things in a certain way which may not be the best way of reciting in Arabic, or may not be completely correct. So it's important to correct those before embarking on this journey so that you don't have to correct them later. So now talking about actually starting off. The choice of the script that you actually go with is really, really important. and those who are eagle-eyed amongst you will see that I've got a number of Qur'ans on the table. The one thing that they all have in common is that they follow the same script. They are the Uthman Taha script. It's very well set up for memorization. Every page ends with a verse. Every juz is the same number of pages. So it's quite a good way of, you can do one page a week, and in 20 weeks you've done one juz, or you can recalculate that in whatever way you want. It's also very clear in its script. In the Khoja community, we're usually used to growing up with the Indo-Pak script. So there might be a slight transition moving over to this, but I would strongly recommend this one. It's also well set up for the tajweed rules of the Quran. And a number of other points on the screen, which I'll kind of go through. The script should also not be too busy. There shouldn't be those kind of markings around the side that might distract you. Try and avoid something that's maybe the color-coded ones. It should be kind of as clear and as not busy as possible. In terms of size, I've got a number of different sizes here. We've got the big A4 size, which is good for actually memorizing. You've got your kind of regular A5 size, which is your sort of standard size. And at the start, I used both of these in combination with each other. So this one to do my kind of revision, and this one to do my new memorization. So the bigger it is, the more clearly you see the words, the less likely you are to make mistakes and memorize it correctly. I then later discovered that you can actually get, outside of Ramadan when you do the amals, you can actually get these small size Qurans as well. This one actually fits into my pocket, which is fantastic. But these are really good for carrying around with you, convenience. You can kind of open it up and check things on a daily basis. But I'd still recommend going with sort of your kind of standard size script. But in your initial phases, it's really, really important to use the same script throughout. What we did with these Qur'ans is we made sure that they were exactly identical before we bought them, so that each line on the page ends with the same word, so that when you're referring to page numbers, you're referring to the same thing visually. Because a really, really important part of memorization is the visualization of the pages. In our culture, in our community, we have a very good culture of when we go to, for example, in Ramadan, we'll recite the du'as of Ramadan. On Thursday nights, we'll recite Du'a Kumail, Surah Yasin, for example. And many people will, after time, be able to recite alongside it. But that doesn't classify necessarily as memorization, because you're not really aware necessarily of what you're reciting, and you when you're reciting from the start, when it's being recited, you're reciting alongside it, you can recite, but you're not able to visualize what is where on the page, what comes next, what's coming, what came before, what links to what. And this visualization of the page is really, really important. So it's important to use the same script, so that when you refer back to it, you say, okay, this verse, I remember this page has a verse that's like 2 lines long, and then there's one that's 3 lines long, and then the next one is half a page. Then there's a similar verse, a few pages forward, and you make these links in your mind because you've got that visualization in your head. And then the last point, I know I say my memory is good, but I have made notes to refer to because it's not that good. The last point is, I would recommend using a physical Quran. I know technology nowadays, everybody has access to a smartphone, everybody has tablets. You can download the apps and have really nice Qurans on your phone. But I'd strongly recommend stick to paper for the actual memorization part, and as much as possible, because the less time you're staring at a screen, the better. And also for your revision, it's handy to have your phone to hand, but if you can manage to get your hands on a smaller version of Quran, it's really, really useful. So next, we're going to talk about kind of the principles of actually memorizing something. How do you memorize something and put it into your head? And the principle here is that repetition, repeating things, is the key to deepening pathways in the brain. Now, I didn't write this. I think my sister wrote this. So if you have questions about that specifically, you can ask her. But from experience, the 3 main parts to memorization, you can split up the 3 main methods, or I would use all of these together. Use all 3 of these things: visual, auditory, and using the meaning. When you're used to it, you'll know what works for you. You'll know what's easy, what comes, and you'll get better at it as well. But when you're starting off, it can be quite difficult. So the question is not how can I learn something, because it's not like you're revising for an exam where you just need to learn concepts and be aware of things. This is about how do I memorize something word for word. And the answer is repetition. So visually, my suggestion would be, and the suggestion was we'll do a demo. So Sister Maliha, please open up to page, let's say, okay, let's go with page 2, because everyone should be somewhat familiar with the verses. So the first verse is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alif, Lam, Mim. We'll take that one to be memorized. Let's go with the second verse. So Sister Maliha, please could you recite the verse 2 times?
ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين.
Now we'll say, okay, now listen to a Qari recite it once. Okay, Qari is recited and she's following along at the same time. Listen to it a couple of more times whilst reciting alongside it, okay? Now close the Quran and try and see if you can recite along with the Qari without looking at the script.
ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين.
Excellent. Now open the Quran, check you got it correct. Yes, correct. Okay, now close it. Now try and do it without looking, without listening.
ذلك لا ريب فيه هدى للsomething.
Now we realize we made a mistake. Let's open the Quran. And you keep repeating this process until you've managed to successfully memorize the verse.
ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين.
MashaAllah. So, as I say, use a combination of all of these different techniques. Now, that's just a demo to kind of represent what it might look like. The number of times you repeat, the number of times you listen, the number of that's completely up to you, but you'll figure out along the way how many times you need to be able to do it. The way that I would do it is I would recite the whole page first, just to familiarize myself with what's coming up. And then I would listen to, and I would do verse by verse. So I'd listen to the verse a couple of times, then I would read it a few times. And I would also use the translation as well to try and make some connections. So I know what the verse is talking about. I know what type of word is supposed to come next. And then once you do that a few times, close your eyes, try and do it, and then eventually it's stuck in your mind. But as I said, over time, you get better and better and better at this. A few suggestions. In terms of listening, like I said, we have loads of... Sorry, is someone raising their hand? No?
Yeah, no, just one of these things. You say, read how many, when you start with reading that, how many ayats you...
We're going to talk about all of that. Yeah? Sorry, we're going to talk about all of that. We're just going through how to memorize a verse, and we're going to talk about routines, how much, how little. We're going to go through all of that. But great question.
Yeah, a really good question. So and we can talk about, but just in answer directly to that one, the way that I did it is I would do half a page in one go. So I would do it verse by verse. So I would memorize one verse, make sure I've got it memorized before moving on to the next verse. And the whole process of that half a page would take maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, depending on how difficult it is. Excellent. For auditory, we've obviously got access to fantastic technology right now. So everybody should hopefully be able to get good access to Qaris. It's good to pick somebody who recites at a good speed, has got good pronunciation and application of the tajweed rules. So a few recommended ones that we've got on screen are Minshawi, Husari, and Al-Ifasi. And one regret that I have is that I didn't start off by doing it with the translation. I started off doing that later on when I was maybe like a few ajza in. I wish I'd done it from the start, but it's really good to do it with the translation so you have an awareness of actually what you are memorizing. I'm going to pass back over to Sister Maliha to talk about retention and routines now.
Okay, so hopefully we're getting an idea that this is all about principles, right? It's about the big things. So if we go back, memorizing, when you memorize for the first time, it's all about repeating whatever that looks like. That might look different for different people, but we're talking about this in the forms of principles. Now, one set of principles that anyone who asks me about memorization, I will be sure to say the R word, routine, is something that we're going to talk about. Because just like the brother's question was, okay, well, I'm memorizing, but how much, how little, when, what, how, what? Because like we said, a lot of the time we're very good at memorizing something, but we're not as good as retaining it. And that's because it needs structure. It needs a specific format, which again looks different depending on our lives, but we need something that is very, very structured. We all know the difference between someone who revises for an exam the night before the exam and someone who's been constantly doing well at school and then the night before just has to look over the notes. It's a very similar idea. So the idea is we're going to talk about retention. And our main principle is about routine. Well, actually there's 3 as you can see, right? These 3 principles are part of what I feel for my own self was part of my journey and what made me carry on, right? Because if we look, let's say we look halfway into the journey, I'm 15 ajza in, how am I maintaining this? How am I still having a normal life? All of these things. And some of these are really, really key. The first thing is about routine, okay? When are you going to memorize? How are you going to memorize? How much time are you going to put in every day, every week, every month, every year? We're going to talk about both of those in different stages. The second thing is something that I say a lot. It's about this journey it's not a sprint. It's not about you getting to the finishing line of, I finished the first juz, I'm done. I finished the second juz, I'm done. There's really no finishing line here. Yes, okay, we get to the end of a juz or a surah or the Quran, but the idea is that we want it to become a part of our everyday lives, something that is sustainable for us to do alongside our kids or our career. And that means that little and often is going to be so much more effective than trying to do loads in one day. So day 1, you do loads. You're tired on day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. Day 6, you're like, okay, let me pick it up again. That's not going to help our brain retain that information. So it's about consistency, and it's always about the fact that it's a marathon. It's a life. It's something that you're going to hold with you for life and do every day for the rest of your life. And that sounds scary, but it also sounds really beautiful. The fact that we're going to open the Quran every day for the rest of our lives is something that all of us should, inshallah, hope for. And like we said, repetition is key, and that's something that we already talked about. So, daily routine. On a day-to-day basis, if I'm memorizing something, let's say I'm memorizing the first juz, what does that look like? Now, something I didn't put up there, but as per the brother's question, it would be useful to talk about, is how much to memorize. Right? There are different speeds as long as you stay consistent. You might do so. If we look at this Quran, there are 20 pages in one juz, right? Now, the speed that you might take, a good speed to take would be about half a page a week or 1 page a week, right? Now, how you do that is up to you. You might do that half page every Monday. You do your new memorization, right? You memorize something new every Monday. And you do that whole half page like Mason does in one sitting. Or you might say, okay, I'm going to do a verse every day because 1 half page in one go is too much for me. But the idea is you keep that consistency. So you say half a page every week for the next year or 2 years or 3 years. Or you say 1 page a week. That's also a good target depending on your life. Personally, just to give you guys an idea, is that I think you said you started on 1 page and then upped it to 2 pages a week. I pretty much did 2 pages a week for my whole journey. Now, 2 pages a week is a journey that will take you about 5 years, start to finish. 1 page a week, if you're very consistent and you don't stop, will take you about 10 years, and so on and so forth, right? I would say half a page or 1 page is a good place to start if you're still trying to start out, figure this out. How's this going? You're just doing the 30th juz, whatever it might be. So just to answer your question. Sorry, brother, does that answer your question? Sure. Sure. So if I was sitting down and doing half a page in one go, I would do 1 verse at a time. I would memorize 1 verse, finish it, memorize the second verse, finish it, etc. Right? Good, excellent. Now, back to daily routine. The thing about routine is that you have to figure out the part of the day that you're the most fresh. For some people, it's first thing in the morning. It happened to be me. For some people who are not as much morning people, and sometimes I envied how much of a night person he is. He'd be up in the late hours of the night, and I would never be able to do that. That was his time. But you need to pick the best time of the day, the time that you're the most fresh. It might be first thing in the morning, or it might be that your kids are up with you at first thing in the morning and it's a no-go. So it might be Fajr. It might be just after the Dhuhr. It might be after everyone's asleep. That golden time, everyone has a golden time, and why not use it for the Quran, right? So the first thing to always do is pick the best time of the day and then reserve that time of your day for The second thing is habit stacking. What does that mean? to form a habit can be really difficult. To say, I'm going to recite the Quran every day, I'm going to pick up the Quran every day. So stack it off the back of something that you already do every day. What does that mean? So for example, I wake up every day. So every time I wake up, it reminds me that I've woken up in the morning, I'm going to do my memorization. I know someone who used to eat, well, we all eat dinner every day, but someone who ate dinner every day, and after dinner, that was their time to sit by the heater because it was winter and do their memorization, right? So stack habits on the back of existing habits. It will make your life easier, right? I have students who do it after Fajr. I have students who do it after Dhuhr. These are things that you can but you have to introspect and figure this out about yourself. And again, like I said, consistency is key. Pick a pace, stick to it. Don't say I'm going to do 2 pages this week and then, okay, next week I've got exams so I can't. And this week my kid has, my daughter has, something. And I pick a pace that works for your life and stick to it. I would rather, and I say this quite a lot, I would rather you do 1 verse a week for the rest of your life than do 2 pages in 1 week, get tired and never pick it up again. We can see the difference. You can see the outcome and the difference between those 2 outcomes. So pick a pace, and it can be the slowest pace in the world, but stick to it, right? That's my biggest advice, and that's what got me through the last, I would say, 10 years. Now, weekly routine. Like Maysam's been mentioning quite a lot, long-term memories don't form overnight, right? We have something in our short-term memory, but we need to transfer it into our long-term memory. And so that needs repetition and revision. So if I've memorized 1 surah or 1 juz or 2 ajza, how do I then retain that? Well, I have to revise it again and again and again. And you might say, oh, how many times? And I would say that probably doesn't have an answer. I memorized the Quran, I finished that Quran 2 years ago, and still today I am doing 2 ajza a day to make sure that I'm not forgetting it. Now that sounds overwhelming, not advocating that, but I'm going to show you what that might look like. How do I retain my revision? How do I retain my memorization day in, day out? So retention methods, there are lots, they're available on this website down here, howtomemorizethequran.com, if you want like timetables and models and stuff. But those kind of overwhelm me, and so I prefer to work on principles, right? Like things that I like to do, and then I'm going to figure out a method that works for me. So some of the biggest principles I would say is that, again, repetition. We have been repeating this, ironically, again and again and again. We're repeating and repeating. But it's about repeating what you've memorized again and again and again and again and again. If I've memorized Surah Al-Buruj, it doesn't mean that it's finished and I can park it aside. It needs to be part of my every day, every week, every year. Okay? And we're going to talk about how to do that. So a big principle to have is that everything you've memorized, if you've memorized 1 surah, you need to make sure you're reviewing it every 7 to 14 days, right? That should be a good benchmark. If I've memorized the whole Quran, I should make sure that I split it up in a way that I've reviewed the whole Quran every 7 to 14 days. So you can see that depending on how much you memorize, the workload is different, right? So starting out, it's not going to be that much work. If I've memorized 5 pages, I don't even need to recite a page a day. I just need to make sure that like half a page a day, and I'd get through it in 10 days, right? Now, what might this look like? Because it can be, like I said, there's different things for different people. So I put up some case studies or some scenarios that might help you guys exemplify what it might actually look like to revise or retain your memorization. So scenario 1, and this might be where a lot of us are starting. I've memorized 2 pages of the Quran, so like it's like one's, right side and left side, right? So 2 pages of the Quran. How do I retain this? Now, sorry, if I just go back a second. You want to split your memorization into 3 parts. You've got the memorization that you memorized just now, just yesterday. That's new memorization. Then you have the memorization that you did, but it's recent, like in the last, let's say, few weeks. And then old memorization is the stuff that you've done a while ago, but you still want to go over and make sure you don't forget, okay? So back to this scenario. I've memorized 2 pages of the Holy Quran. How do I retain this? So my solution would be, I'm going to recite my most recent, my newest page every day. Every single day, I'm going to recite that new page. And I'm just going to make sure that I get half of the other page done. So I finish every 2 days, actually, not every 4 days. I messed that up. But you can see the idea, right? So every day, all I'm doing is a page and a half. And I'm retaining those 2 pages. Okay. Now it's getting to 10 pages. I've memorized half of a juz, right? How do I retain this? And I've memorized 10 pages, but 3 of those pages are really easy. For example, there are 3 pages that I've memorized a while ago and I'm really good at. How should I set up my timetable? So the first solution is, Recite 1.5 pages every day. So 10 pages, 1.5 pages a day, about a week. It's going to take you a week. And that means you're not revising 10 pages a day. You're revising a page and a half. That's going to take you like 3 minutes tops, 4 minutes? Yeah, 5 minutes? That's 5 minutes of Quran a day to retain 10 pages of Quran. For me, that's really good cost-benefit analysis. Is that how you say it? Cost-benefit? Yeah? Okay. Right. Another solution. I could put aside my 3 really easy pages. I don't need to recite those every day. And instead, I'm going to take the other 7 pages and do the same split. 1.5 pages, 1.5, 1.5. So in 4 days, I've gone through all of those. And then those 3 pages, I'm just going to throw in somewhere, you know, because they're really easy. I can probably recite it on the way to school or on the way to uni or whatever. Yeah, make sense? So there are different solutions. It doesn't have to look the same. And number 3, because some of us might be in this position where they finish a whole juz. What do I do now? A whole juz? How do I retain a whole juz? Right, one solution, and this is specifically for the 30th juz, just because I did this for a 30th juz class. Okay, the whole 30th juz, that's 20 pages. How do I split that up? So I'm going to pick out my recent pages. So let's say my 7 most recent pages and do, split the rest of the juz over 7 days. Okay, yeah. So I'm going to take my 5 most recent pages and make sure I recite those every day, because those are like still, I don't know, the word is gacha. They're like still, like so they need to be done every day because they're still not even in the medium term. And then the rest of the pages, so I've done 5 pages, taken that out. The rest of the 15 pages, I'm going to split. So maybe 3 pages a day, 2 pages a day. So what am I really doing in practicality every day? I'm doing 2 old pages and 5 new pages. So that's going to take me about 20 minutes a day, right? 20, 25 minutes. So you can see that as I memorize more of the Quran, yes, the workload builds up, but it's not instant. It's not like I start memorizing and tomorrow I'm putting in an hour a day. It's going to build up. Out of curiosity, what does it look like for me today? For me today, I've just dropped down from 3 ajza to 2 ajza every day of revising, because that means 30 ajza, 10 days, I'm memorizing. I'm going through all of it. So 2 ajza, how long does that take? Or 3 ajza used to take me an hour and a half an hour per juz. Now it's about 2 ajza a day, that's taking me an hour. For what that looks like, that's like my hour in the morning before my daughter wakes up, or on the commute. I'm studying right now, so on the commute into university, that would be my hour. So that's what that looks like right now. But obviously, the whole Quran and where we are right now, those are 2 different things. It's just an example. Right. So feel free, we're going to ask questions and stuff later, so just have your questions in your mind. So these are just those added principles that make sure you split up your memorization into your really recent pages and make sure you're reciting those every day, and then split up the rest of the pages like over time. So that's just, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Okay, teachers. So before I pass on to Mason to talk about this, teachers. I didn't have a teacher for the first 23 ajza of my life. And when I did, for the last 7 ajza of my life, it was almost life-changing. And so when you listen to this slide or this bit, then I really want you to, I'm heavily in favor of you guys, it's biased, have a teacher. It's not a question, yeah.
Just to clarify, she is currently doing a qualification to become a teacher as well. So she's much in favor of teachers in general. Yes, the status of teachers in Islam, and in particular Quran teachers, is very high. And ideally, if you can find a teacher, definitely go for it. It can be hard to find the right person, but it will make a huge difference. And for me, within my memorization journey, a huge amount of credit goes to my teacher. His name was Agha Rahimi. I never actually learnt what his first name was. I just know him as Agha Rahimi. Ideally, it should be somebody who you can kind of see as a role model, as a mentor, someone you can look up to. Because if it's somebody who's been through the same or a memorization journey of their own, hopefully a similar one to the one you're going to go through, then they'll be able to relate to you. They'll be able to give you advice that is relevant to you, and they'll know what you're going through. They'll be able to support you throughout the whole journey. You can look up to them, you can use them as a mentor. They're going to be able to provide the right kind of guidance, the right kind of advice, and also an added bit of motivation. Because when the going gets tough, you know that your teacher is going to be there to support you. Sometimes it will be positive support, sometimes it will be less positive support. But it will give you some sort of accountability as well, because you know that I'm feeling tired, but I know that whenever my class is, it might be on a Friday evening or it might be on a Sunday morning, I know that that teacher is going to test me on not only what I'm supposed to have memorized this week, my new stuff, but also all the old stuff that I should be revising on a regular basis, as Sister Mali has just gone through. So that extra little bit of something to prepare for each week I mean, it really worked for me, because there were weeks alongside doing education, there were weeks where you're kind of like, oh, I'm not too sure I can get this done, but you've got something in the back of your mind that's telling you, no, you have to do this. You have to. And I'm impressed that she was able to do it without a teacher throughout the whole, or the first massive chunk. It'll also give you an opportunity to regularly be tested on, obviously your new stuff, which you're kind of getting more familiar with, but your old stuff as well, where you might have memorized something with a mistake, or you might have not revisited it in a while, you might be mixing things up. They will be able to also identify your strengths and your weaknesses. So my teacher knew that for the first maybe like 3 or 4 juz I was quite good. Then there was a patch in the middle which I was not so good at because it's quite difficult. Then I was home free for another maybe like 3 or 4 juz, and then the rest was not so great. So they'll specifically be able to pick out passages or pages that they know you're not good at and they know that you struggle with, and check how are you doing on those pages. Have you made an extra effort to revise those, or are you just doing your same old, same old? And the last point there, if you've got a teacher, often you'll be doing it in a group, you'll be doing it in a class. Having those extra classmates and having that little bit of extra competition in a healthy way can be really, really useful as motivation as well. And I'm going to hand back over to Maliha to talk about the importance of a partner, because I had somebody in my class. We had a class of maybe like 8 or 9, as I mentioned, but slowly over time people started dropping out. But I still had somebody who was kind of with me throughout, all the way up to 15, and the knowledge that we were both doing it, kind of we motivated each other. We were like, okay, we'll keep doing it, we'll keep going on. But I think there is a really important concept which we can talk about now.
Okay, so I'm actually missing a slide. That slide I don't think it came up. Anyway, I'm just going to talk about it really briefly. It's just the idea of mubahatha. Ignore all of this, because I'm not going to talk about this. I've decided not to. But I want to talk about the importance of a partner in general. And the concept of having a partner and revising with them is called mubahatha, which is the only reason I've got this slide up. But ignore all that stuff up there. I'm not really going to talk about it. I'm just going to talk about, if you find someone who is your companion, if you found someone, maybe in the audience today, you've decided I'm going to memorize this, and the person next to me, we're both really feeling this, and we're going to do this together. Having someone who's doing the same thing as you, especially something as unique. This is a very unique thing. Something as unique as this and something as tough as this. We're talking about how exciting and fun and amazing it was, but it was also tough. And having someone who's also doing that with you is so, so valuable, right? It's someone who you get together with once a week and you recite whatever you've revised or whatever you've memorized. And it's such a support system. And when I went to Iran, I really felt that there was a community of Hufadh, and I found it very easy to find a companion. Here it's a little bit harder, but it's still possible, especially if we've got people who have come together for this. And so I really urge you guys, find a teacher, find a companion, and really, we weren't meant to live this life in isolation. We were meant to do it as a community. And it would be really wonderful to see a community of Hufadh in Leicester and in the other communities of, people who have come from outside of Leicester. So in terms of what we wanted to share, I think that's pretty much it, because I think a lot of valuable discussion might come from some Q&A. Again, just to reiterate for those of us who weren't there right at the beginning, our email addresses are up there. If you need to email about any kind of, did you agree with what I said at the beginning? So in terms of Hifdh and Tajweed, Maysam's a really good person to go to. In terms of Hifdh, particularly for sisters, but not restricted, if you want to talk about Hifdh or any other issues or inquiries or anything like that, there are email addresses up there, and those are quite useful to get in contact. So what we're going to do is we're going to open the floor for questions, and inshallah we'll do our best to answer those. So please, before we do that, please recite a really, really, really loud salawat.
I have a mic with me, so if anyone has any questions, just let me know.
Assalamu alaikum. Really, really good, really inspirational, genuinely. One question, well, maybe two questions. One, reflecting back on both your journeys and kind of looking back and looking at the prerequisites, would you say it's advisable to try and learn Arabic as well for understanding's sake? Or would that actually hinder the process of memorization, do you think? That's question one, and then we can start there.
I can answer based off a conversation we had with Sheikh Anwar like maybe an hour ago.
Okay, sure.
So he was saying that actually his knowledge of Arabic sometimes made it slightly confusing for him because his awareness of the grammar, because the grammar of Quranic Arabic is quite different to the grammar of like spoken Arabic. So it can make it quite confusing sometimes because you're expecting something to be said in a certain way, but it might not be said in that way. I have not learned Arabic. My sister can speak for herself, but I never learned Arabic in a formal way. But throughout the process of doing the memorization, you do pick up quite a lot because there's the same kind of themes, the same type of grammar repeated in many ways. I do regret not knowing more than I had, but it's definitely still possible to be able to do it without learning Arabic because that in itself is a huge, huge commitment.
Okay, so before I answer this question, I should allude to the differences between us in terms of our styles. He's incredibly talented and he has the sharpest memory of anyone I know. So I often, as a younger individual, would often sometimes envy his sheer talent. For me, it was a harder slog and a lot more hard work, and I was more prone to mistakes. And I think that influences my answer because I would say that having the Arabic under my belt was incredibly useful to make the connections. I've never been a rote memorizer. You know, like sometimes in some cultures we have this like rote memorization approach to learning. I've never been good at that. I had to like make the connections in my mind and think about what verse comes next. So for me, it was useful to have the Arabic. Having said that, I don't think if you don't have Arabic under your belt or you're not a very skilled Arabic speaker or whatever it might be, I don't think that should hinder you. But I think what you could do is side by side say, okay, I'm learning these words. I could take a short course in Quranic Arabic. These are things that will only help you, but not having them should not hinder you from trying this journey, if that makes sense. But because of our different styles, I really, really, really benefited from the meaning. And I think that was one of my main ways to memorize the Quran. Yeah.
And was that done in conjunction with memorization, or did you learn Arabic first and then?
I had some background in Arabic.
Fine, okay.
It was strengthened when I went to Qom, and then that aided me with like going back over my previous memorization. Sure. But I did have some background before.
Okay, thank you both very much.
No
Thank
worries. Did you have a second question, or was that encapsulated? Brilliant.
Ladies, if you have any questions, but while we're waiting, could I ask a question? Is this skill, is it for young people or what, or is there like, can older people start on it?
So, alhamdulillah, in London, in the last 5 years, or maybe longer, we've seen a community of Hufadh grow. So not the whole Quran, but we know individuals who are part of a community who have memorized 5 ajza, 7, 10. Someone was just telling me they're about to hit halfway, and they are old enough to be my mum. And so what I would say is that this is not a journey that needs to be restricted to a particular age. I've seen people of all ages, all walks of life be able to do this. And in fact, I'm inspired by those seniors that I know who have memorized a significant portion. I think that is so beautiful. It may mean that your pace is different. It might mean that according to your age or your circumstance, you have to go a bit slower. But I think the main purpose of memorizing the Quran is for us to open the Quran and have a relationship with it every day. So it doesn't matter how fast we're going. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. We're not trying. There is no finishing line, because even now, having completed the memorization of the Holy Quran, 30 ajza, I still don't see a finishing line. All I see is a constant connection with the Quran, a reason to open it every day, and a chance to improve my memory every single day. Do you want to add anything?
Just one thing that I would add is that every single person in this room and every single person alive has the potential and the capacity to be able to do it, right? No matter what age you are. Obviously, if you're younger, your ability to memorize and retain might be a little bit sharper. So you might absorb things quicker, but that doesn't mean that you can't start at any point in life. And as Sister Mali has said, we've got a fantastic example of people within our own community that have picked it up later in life and are smashing it. They're doing so amazing, and it's really, really inspiring. And hopefully that should inspire people of all ages.
Thank you very much, because there was a question on the WhatsApp saying, are there people who can't ever memorize? So thank you for that.
I was one of those. When I tell you the state of my memory when I started memorizing the Quran, it was poor, and I was that sibling who would lose everything, and my other siblings would laugh at me, and I would forget things. I was the forgetful one. So I think my message is, with that timeline, is if I can do it, trust me, anybody can, is my main message.
We've got another question.
Yeah. Would it be possible to also get the slides to us? Because I know there were some contact details and a website, and I didn't manage to write it down. So
yeah, so actually, we had a good suggestion that maybe we could collate this is more directed towards the organizers, maybe we can collate the email addresses and we can create like an infographic or like a summary sheet or something that we can send out to you guys. And it might be useful. You can have some of the resources and some of the like timetables and things like that. Would that be useful? Yeah? Brilliant.
Any other questions?
Do you have a question? No? The PowerPoint? Yes, I think that's what we were saying. We'll arrange to get your email addresses and send out some sort of summary. Yeah, inshallah.
Slightly separate to this specific topic, but you mentioned obviously that it's helped with memorization generally. Examples, if you don't mind?
The best example is probably exams. Because we were doing it alongside exams, it was like you're revising for your GCSEs, you're revising for A-levels. For those youngsters amongst you that are probably going to start going through this same journey, that was a really good, a really clear benefit that I saw. Like, I'd be able to remember things that people in my class otherwise wouldn't. Another example, football stats, they just stick in my head. So when I see things, when I read things, they kind of just stick in my head. Who do I support? I'm an Arsenal fan. But also, like in work, like I can see that because I was doing a graduate program, so I was rotating around different parts of the business. So my ability to pick things up and retain them, and then when moving from one part of the business to the other, still retaining the things that I had from previously, was quite good. I've always been good with birthdays now as well. Like a random thing, but yeah, those are, I guess, practical examples of improvements in memory. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think that exam one is very relevant. When you think about the younger ones, like kids when they grow up, and what benefits you guys saw starting at a relatively young age?
Yeah.
And have you felt that has lasted as you grow up?
Sure. So just for the people that weren't able to hear that, so the question is more on starting from a young age, does that benefit you as you grow up as well? I think one really crucial thing, which is probably similar for both of us, is that we started at a young age with a slight push from people around us, but the reason we continued is because we enjoyed it. Now this journey, everyone has the potential, the ability, the capacity, but not everybody necessarily will enjoy it, and not everybody will complete it all the way. But you have to have that self-motivation and the self-desire to be able to do it. The other benefit that I saw was, we were growing up at an age where technology was starting to become quite widely available. People had smartphones, social media was starting to become kind of more common. But because I was so focused on this, I didn't get distracted by those things. And I think that was maybe one benefit that I didn't put on the slides because it's more difficult to put into words. But not being distracted by all those things, it was a huge benefit. I think starting from a young age, obviously, would be beneficial because you've got maybe more time, but then also your routine changes on a more regular basis because you move from class to class, you move from year to year, you'll go from GCSE to A-level, then to university. So with the timeline that we kind of suggested, if you were doing 2 pages a week, it might take you 5 years. your development over those 5 years, if you're going from like the age of 10 to 15, so much might change in your life. So it's also worth being aware of that. Do you have anything to add? No? Does that answer your question? Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for inspiring session. It's really amazing. Thank you. Second thing is that obviously we are all keen. That's why we're here. Just want to ask you, if we somehow create a group here in Leicester, would you be able to guide us, support us through that group so that we can start our own journey as well, inshallah?
So those are conversations we can have, inshallah, outside of the workshop. There are different avenues that we can suggest, but I think that's probably a conversation to have outside of this. Maybe we can chat over email, or we can speak to the committee, but yeah, I hope that, yeah. This is like indicative of something that's like you guys have an interest and sort of some sort of motivation to start, and I think that's really beautiful. It's a really tough but beautiful journey to take. So yeah. There's a
I just want to ask, how did you rate yourself? I mean, you didn't give up in the middle.
Yeah.
You have to finish this.
Yeah.
Start this.
Yeah.
What special things you did?
Special things, two big things. I'll probably forget the second one by the time I go through the first, but that's on. One thing is that because it became a part of my life, so it was something that was sustainable. So I talked about this a lot. It's much more valuable to be able to do a little bit every day than to do 2-3 hours in one day, get tired the next. And so it's something I would recommend would have to become a part of your life, in the sense that it's as obligatory on you or as important in your life to do as brushing your teeth or having lunch, right? It's something that you can't miss in your day. That, for me, I would say would be one of the main reasons that I carried on, because it was impossible for me to see a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday without Quran in it. Does that make sense? So it's something that has to become a part of your life every day, right? And we all have days where we can't, there's a day off here and there, but the important thing is that it's part of my everyday routine, similar to brushing my teeth and combing my hair, etc. Just on cue, I forgot the second one. Yeah, so I think it's all of these things that we talked about, all of these principles, having routine, sticking to it, having a consistent pace. And then at the end of the day, it's just whether you want to carry on. If it's something that you enjoy and you like doing, it's something that you're going to find easier to carry on and keep going with. So yeah.
I also think when you start to see the rewards and the benefits of it in your own life, that also adds an extra bit of motivation. For me, one of the really, really big things was I would do it mostly when I would come back from school. That would be my time to do my kind of revision period. So maybe from like 4 o'clock until dinner time, until maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock. And it's like time to decompress and be away from the world, because you've just spent 8 hours of your day surrounded by people. So having time to yourself to reflect on yourself as well. And then I would do my new memorization last thing before I would go to sleep. And I craved that time away from the everyday of life. And I think that was one thing that really kept me going when it got tough, because I was like, I want to do this. And that was my motivation. I don't know, maybe that answers your question a little bit more as well.
Sorry, can I ask a question? Regarding the memorization, do you recommend starting with the Juz Amma, the 30th Sipara? Because obviously if we want to start from a young age, our children, and obviously when they're little, they need to see, that kind of achievement and that motivation. So do you recommend it starting from the Juz Amma? That way, you're doing a few surahs, because obviously if you start with the first Sipara, it can feel a bit difficult, isn't it?
So there are two main approaches you can take, and one of them is to go and, some of systems, for example, the Iranian system will go do the 30th juz, the 29th juz, and then go to the front first, second, third. That's one approach. Or like you said, do the 30th juz, and then if you enjoy it, you go to the first. The second approach is just to start from the beginning of the Quran. There are pros and cons to both. The pro of the 30th juz being first is all of the things you said, a young age, easing into it, seeing if you like it, all of these things. Being able to use those surahs, for example, in your salah, that's a really big advantage that you will see after memorizing the 30th juz. The advantage of having the first juz as your first starting option, and I'm a bit biased because I actually only memorized the 30th juz. It was my second last juz that I memorized. I didn't memorize it. I started from number 1. And I actually found that much easier. I actually found the 30th juz really difficult because they were very, very similar verses. You know, they're all very short, difficult words. Things are similar, you know, verses in Surah, I still don't know them that well. Surah Takwir is similar to Surah Infitar, yeah? I found that really difficult, and I found it much easier. Starting from the first juz, the verses are longer, but somehow that makes it easy. I found it easier. So there are different approaches that you can take, would be my main answer. But don't knock the idea of starting with the first juz, because it's not as difficult as one might think. I think that's my main message. Yeah. So maybe we can take one or two more questions, and then inshallah we can wrap this up. I'm conscious I don't want to take up so much. We don't want to take up so much of your time.
Do you recommend like a Quran buddy? Like
100%. Yeah. There was a whole slide on this. Okay. I think I missed it out in this actual presentation, but I have this like the offshoot slide to it. Having a buddy or a mubahitha partner, 100% really, really recommend. I didn't have one for the first 23 ajza. For the last 7 ajza and for my period where I was consolidating everything I'd done, it was one of the most valuable parts of my journey, one of the most valuable parts of my journey. So in a nutshell, yes, very useful. So maybe one last question and then we can wrap that up. Yep.
We talked about the teachers. Unfortunately, we don't have any Hafiz in our. So how would you find one?
So the teacher that I mentioned, Agha Rahimi, he's not from our community, he's from the Iranian community. So obviously, you know, London, we do have access to other communities as well. So you don't have to just look within this Leicester community that is sitting here today. I'm sure you have access to other contacts. But the overall objective is hopefully that through this we can prepare ourselves for the next generation, so that the next generation won't be looking, where do I find a teacher?
To add to that, there are, obviously now with COVID, in a post-COVID world, I would say, there are a lot of virtual avenues for you to find a teacher. It's not an ideal situation. The ideal situation would be to have a face-to-face teacher, but there are avenues. And if anyone is interested, we can have a one-to-one conversation about some avenues where you can find virtual teachers. There are, so I didn't have this up on the slide, but a place where you can find a virtual teacher. So they're real, by the way. It's just that you're seeing them virtually. They're not like AI or anything. www.darulquran.co.uk. They are a Darul Quran that's based in Iran, so they're Iranian teachers, but they have a platform online. What you do is you sign up and you say, I want to memorize this juz, and they assign you to a teacher. That's one method. Another method is specifically for sisters. There are some Darul Qur'ans around the world. So there's, for example, Darul Quran Toronto. They have a 30th juz program where you can enroll to start the 30th juz with teachers, and then they've moved on to the 29th. And I think my group that I had are now finishing the 28th juz. So that's a real achievement. They finished 3 ajza. So there are different avenues, just because we don't have in our... I think just to, I guess, reiterate Mason's point is that there are lots of avenues that you can take, and hopefully that's helpful to you guys. So I think if we don't have any more questions, we just wanted to say a huge thank you to having us today. Your community is beautiful, and your mosque is beautiful as well, and I pray that all of you are brought barakah in your lives, and that for all of us, our connection with the Holy Quran is deepened, whether it's through memorization or through other ways. And so could we please finish the session with a really, really loud salawat for the barakah of everyone in this room.
On behalf of the community as well, I'd like to thank Brother Misam and Sister Malia for coming all the way from London. May Allah increase their tawfiqat. Please recite one more loud salawat. There's just a bowl at the end. We are also collecting donations for the Quran competition today. So if you'd like to donate, there's a bowl at the end. Or if you'd like to donate electronically, then please come and get in touch with me. Salawat.
Assalamu alayka ya Rasulallah. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا أبا محمد الحسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولى وابن مولى، يا غريب الغرباء، يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلطان أبا الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفينا وشفي والدينا في يوم الجزاء. وفقنا الله لزيارتك يا مولاي، ورزقنا الله شفاعتك في الدنيا والآخرة. السلام عليك وعلى أختك فاطمة المعصومة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا حجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب الزمان، سيدي الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان من شر الزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن ويا شريك القرآن ويا كعبة الإيمان ويا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان، عجل الله فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتئه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. إلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات، رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة مع الصلوات.
Refreshments have been arranged, ladies on the left hand side and gents on the right hand side.